Amanda, I see we have 83 participants. Is that who we're waiting for? Can we get started? 84 participants.
That sounds good. We can go ahead.
I think so.
I think it's Joe. I think it's Senator Comerford who's starting.
It's Representative Blaze kicking us off.
It's Representative Blay who's starting.
We're going now? Beautiful. Well, welcome everybody this evening to this gathering to talk about funding for municipal water and sewer infrastructure in our small towns. We're so grateful for our partners for being here today. This started when Senator Comerford and I, well, before Senator Comerford and I were first elected. One of the things that we heard a great deal about on the campaign trail back in 2018 was the water and sewer infrastructure challenges that our rural small towns are facing and the aging infrastructure. We were able to pull together a group of folks in the fall of 2019, including many of you here in the virtual room tonight. And since then, we've worked with you and with our local and state partners to really bring this issue to the forefront. And I am so grateful not only to work alongside Senator Comerford and her great team, but also the planning agencies, Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Berkshire Regional Planning, and Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We've been able to keep this conversation going, and it has really resulted in some concrete steps that we've been able to take alongside our state partners, including Secretary Theoharides and Secretary Keneally. I want to welcome them and their teams here tonight. I also want to recognize our other legislative offices that are here. And we're doing this by text. I'm hoping that we have everybody, but if not, by all means, let us know in the chat and we're happy to call you out. I certainly want to welcome Lucas McDearman from Senator Goby's office, Danielle Allard from Senator Gomez's office, Juan Anderson Burgos from Rep Duffy's office, and Joel McAuliffe from Senator Lester's office. If there is anyone else, I'm hopeful that somebody will say something to me or give me some magical sign in virtual Zoom world to tell me that we've missed you. But we're so thrilled to have this incredible group here together tonight. And at this time, I want to turn it over to the fierce Senator Jo Comerford. Has a little bit going on these days. She's chairing this new committee that's really doing a deep dive into the COVID response. And she is nonstop, and I am thrilled to be able to work alongside her and this entire Western Mass legislative delegation in support of our communities. Senator Jo Comerford.
Thank you, Representative Blay, and right back at you. Really grateful for our partnership with our shared towns in this region, alongside our great colleagues. I want to add my own heartfelt thanks to Rep. Blay's warm welcome and thanks to the regional planning agencies, and of course, Secretary Keneally and Secretary Theoharides. I also want to just tip my hat to my own team member, Elena, who's on, for whom I'm exceedingly grateful all days, and especially with regard to the water sewer infrastructure work. And also Rep. Blay and I want to acknowledge Congressman McGovern and Senator Markey, especially, and their teams who have been really important partners as we tackle this at the state level. So we have a statement up, a problem statement up to help focus us for this evening. And the problem statement is this: rural and small towns face high costs associated with operating, maintaining, and adapting aging water and sewer infrastructure, or they have no existing infrastructure that on which they can rely. So tonight we want to talk all about money, locating public funding for investing in water and wastewater, in the infrastructure, and building capacity of small town systems. And again, many people have been engaged and leading on this for decades. So this is one more step in the journey, and I'm so grateful to be among you. Thanks for folks who are signing in on the chat. That is name, town, and role in the town so that we can know who's on the line. So the agenda for this evening looks like this. This is the welcome portion. We're going to hear then from our amazing partners in this work at the state and federal level: MassWorks, MVP, DEP, BRIC or BRIC, and USDA. And if we're good and keep on time, there'll be questions, which I think you'll all find very, very valuable. And with that, I want to, and it's my real honor, to turn now and invite comments from both Secretary Keneally and Secretary Theoharides. And let me say about both up front, that both of these humans, these really good humans, really have invested in Western Massachusetts. They crisscross the Commonwealth and have since I was on the campaign, and certainly all throughout the first 2 years of my service. They are really, really mindful of regional equity, both in what they say when they show up, of course, and how they characterize Western Massachusetts, and in their actions. They're fluent out in what we face out here, both our challenges and our assets. And in introducing Secretary Keneally, who'll go first, I want to really appreciate Secretary Keneally and his team for efforts around the community One Stop for Growth, which we're going to hear about, and to make grant funding more accessible and easier to navigate and responsive. So Secretary Keneally, over to you.
Great, Senator, thank you so much. It's great to be with you all here tonight, and great to be with Rep. Blais as well, and of course my colleague in the cabinet, Secretary Theoharides, and two folks on my team, Undersecretary Ashley Stolba and Assistant Secretary Juan Vega. And I very much appreciate your comments on regional equity. It's one of the core principles by which we operate in our office and frankly across the administration. So I'm glad our efforts in that regard have not gone unnoticed. And thank you, Senator and Representative, as always, for your incredible partnership with us on all matters of housing and economic development. I thought I would touch on 3 points tonight briefly. Our MassWorks infrastructure program, the recent economic development bill passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, and then the community One Stop for Growth. I know Assistant Secretary Vega will take us into more detail on MassWorks and the One Stop, but I'll hit some highlights on that one. So with respect to MassWorks, building strong communities has always been essential to advancing economic development statewide for us. This has been particularly amplified as we look to recover from the economic devastation left by COVID-19. MassWorks is truly one of our most flexible, one of our most sought after grant programs. It helps, I always say, it funds infrastructure. People ask us, what can MassWorks fund? And it can fund water and sewer and lights and streets and the basic building blocks of development. What MassWorks really funds at the end of the day is community collaboration, because it lets the community come to us and say, this project is particularly important for us. This is going to help us get where we want to go, and ask for state funding for it. And it's a great way to have the community align efforts, designate a project as being important, and have us fund it. In a lot of ways, the MassWorks funds are the hardest funds to find in a project, those basic building blocks of infrastructure. My first year as secretary, I got to travel a lot. I had the pleasure of visiting a very diverse group of communities to deliver MassWorks grants. It's one of the more fun parts of the job. I'm always going to remember joining Senator Comerford in Hatfield to award a $2 million MassWorks grant to extend water and sewer lines along Route 5, increasing commercial capacity and supporting local businesses there. That same day, we also, with Representative Blais, delivered a $2 million MassWorks grant to Montague, and that was to restore and update a historic 1912 pedestrian bridge and make water and sewer upgrades in the Turner Falls Canal District. Those are two pretty good examples of MassWorks. Very important project for a municipality, ones that were integral to their economic development strategy, where we got to provide the funding for those projects. So two good and frankly fun examples, and that was a fun day in those two towns. If you recap what we've done in MassWorks since the start of the administration, since 2015, we've awarded about $533 million in grants to 259 shovel-ready projects. And that $533 million of public money was leveraged by about $11 billion in private investment. So these grants are meant to unlock meaningful private investment And along the way, if you think about the aggregate impact of those dollars, it's been tens of thousands of jobs, both permanent full-time and part-time jobs and construction jobs, millions of square feet of commercial space, more than 17,000 new housing units, very important given the state of housing in the Commonwealth. And so it's had a big impact, I think, on our economic development efforts overall. Importantly, MassWorks every year allocates about 10% of the funds to assist municipalities that have populations of 7,000 or less in completing roadway safety projects. And so there's an important carve out there for smaller communities. And the 8 small and rural towns that received these awards in 2020, they're going to see extensive roadway improvements as well as upgrades to culverts and underground water and sewer utilities along some critical thoroughfares, improve public safety. It has a good impact, eliminating the need for long-term detours. And in one case, these smaller town grants are going to improve some housing density. So that's a little bit on MassWorks. Juan Vega's got a lot more to say in the program, but it is a large and flexible, and therefore maybe the most impactful tool we have in the economic development toolkit. The second topic to touch on tonight is the Economic Development Bill, and in particular, a rural and small town development fund is part of that bill. And so the bill overall passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, it's $626 million in bond authorizations. It's going to help us really accelerate our economic recovery strategy. It's going to help get people back to work. It's going to support small businesses. It's going to help us foster more innovation across the state. It's going to help us revitalize our downtowns and ensure housing stability. And so it's got a number of important provisions in the bill. It's got funding for transit-oriented housing development, for climate-resilient affordable housing, for neighborhood stabilization, and funding to revitalize underutilized properties. The bill, by the way, is a result of an extensive economic development planning process going back to the early 2019. Interestingly, every new term of a governor requires the development of a new economic development plan for the state. And we had an exhaustive process in 2019, including 9 public engagement sessions, we called them, including one in the Pioneer Valley, one in the Berkshires, and a lot of great collaboration with the legislature to get the bill passed. And very grateful to the senator and the rep for their roles in that. I think it's a very important bill. Perhaps most relevant for everybody today in that bill is legislation that creates a rural and small town development fund for community infrastructure development needs in communities like yours. And so if you think about the projects that could be part of that fund, it could be rehabilitation of housing in a rural community to bring an underutilized property back onto the market. It could be design or construction of a new water line connection to an adjacent town for an area served only by wells. I think there'll be a lot more to say as we stand up this program and execute on it in the coming months. But one of the important things to remember is that both this new program and MassWorks are now part of something called the Community One Stop for Growth. And that'll be the third topic I want to touch on today. And again, Juan Vega will have a lot more to say about this one. So the Community One Stop for Growth. The background on this one is, as we went around the state and got input for the Economic Development Plan, we heard a lot about the programs we have. And I'd say the common theme was you guys have a lot of good programs, but there's a fair amount of complexity in terms of how those programs get delivered, in terms of how people apply for them. And they're not really aligned against common objectives. They really feel like individual programs. And so we took that feedback back and we said, geez, what if we were to combine some of these programs and have a one-stop approach where the dialogue is not so much around people applying to one program for funding, but it's coming to us and again, articulating what the community sees as their goals. What are the projects that are most important for them? And to start the dialogue that way. And then we can then figure out the sources of support for that project versus having people apply for individual grant programs. And so, Juan will get into the details, but this year we are launching the One Stop. And so MassWorks and 9 other programs are now part of this One Stop. And an important part of the process, it's an optional part, but I think an important one is something we're calling the expression of interest. And the window for that one is open now, where a community can come to us and just, again, express what's important to them. What are the things on their development roadmap? What are the projects that are most important for them? and start the dialogue that way. We may say, great project, it's the right time, please apply for the one-stop, we'll figure out how to fund it. We may say it's a great project, but it's too early. We may say there's other better sources of funding for that project. But the whole idea here is for us to be more streamlined in terms of how we deliver our programs and really have a much more collaborative process. Again, rather than having people chase individual grants, be able to come to us and say, here's what they want to get done, and we'll figure out the best way to fund it. So I think these are three pretty exciting developments. MassWorks, as always, is a great program every year. We're thrilled with the passage and signing of the Economic Development Bill and all that's in that one. And I think the one-stop is truly going to be a different and better way for us to work together. So thank you so much for having me here today. Hope you have a great dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you so much to you and your team. That was a terrific recap. It's like a roadmap for what we'll talk about tonight. So thank you so much. And thanks to the folks who are going to go through in greater depth, as you say.
All right.
Next, we're going to turn to Secretary Theoharides, who I would say, and as Rep. Blais was talking about the history of this, there was an important stop in the middle of this with Secretary Theoharides, who worked so quickly and so deftly, I will say, to help us get to yes on how do we help begin expanding state funds for water and sewer infrastructure. So again, as I said before, she is no stranger to Western Massachusetts or regional equity or the needs and assets of our small towns. But let me just say that this secretary also paddled down the Connecticut River for an entire day, investing herself both in our beautiful, unparalleledly gorgeous place, and also just talking to municipal officials and environmentalists and business owners, just trying to really grapple with how we steward this beautiful body of water. So like Secretary Keneally, Secretary Theoharides shows up again and again. So thank you and welcome, Secretary.
Well, it is never hard to make it out to my former home. And it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. And a big thank you to Senator Comerford and Representative Blais, the planning agencies that are here tonight, so many familiar faces from communities who have worked with myself and my team. MVP was really developed with a lot of you around the table in Western Mass. So thanks to all of you for being here tonight. While we often don't think enough about our water and wastewater infrastructure, and it's not sometimes the most exciting topic on the table, I think it's easy to agree that the work of local and regional water and wastewater utilities has never been more critical. This year, as we've experienced a severe drought, and the second severe drought we've seen while I've been in state government, it really tested the Commonwealth's local water suppliers during a time when they were already feeling really tested. And droughts are likely to become more frequent and more severe as the climate changes, which I think underscores the importance of taking action now to ensure we have resilient water suppliers and treatment facilities, and that they're prepared to take on these challenges, some of which, as in the case of the summer, we really had what is considered to be a flash drought. It's a drought that comes on very quickly with not a lot of warning and not a lot of prep time. And that's the kind of drought that we may fall into a lot more frequently in the future. I think additionally, as we approach the 1-year mark in this pandemic, the importance of investing in every aspect of public health and community resiliency is really very clear. Access to clean water is a foundational aspect of a healthy community, and a community that is able to grow and prosper well into the future. The Baker-Polito administration is committed to ensuring that all residents throughout the Commonwealth have access to safe, clean drinking water, while we work to maintain a clean and safe system of water resources. Just last week, Governor Baker signed into law an act promoting awareness of sewage pollution in public waters, important legislation that will help us protect the public health and the environment by providing notifications to residents about combined sewer overflows. We also signed into law at the end of the last session a bill that would eliminate flame retardants from common household and childcare products, including mattresses and car seats. And while this is obviously a public health issue in terms of exposure within your own homes, as things like mattresses and car seats get thrown into landfills, the chemicals actually run off into streams and groundwater. And we were really pleased to sign this bill and thank the legislature for their good work to get both of these to our desk. We've also been taking action to protect residents and communities from another group of toxic chemicals, what are called PFAS chemicals, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, and have been working closely with communities across the Commonwealth to test for PFAS and lead chemicals and address any contamination found. And all of you in communities are on the front lines of this issue. So we're committed to working together. Many of the staff here tonight from DEP are really working on this on a daily basis, and so committed to ensuring that all of you have the resources you need as we begin to take on this new challenge. Our administration makes significant financial resources available to communities and regional drinking water and wastewater utilities across the Commonwealth to help protect the public health and the environment, and to ensure that our water systems are resilient to climate change. One of these sources that I wanted to hit on tonight, and I know will be further discussed, is the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, also known as the SRF program, which offers subsidized loans to finance projects to improve, protect, or rebuild water quality and infrastructure systems across Massachusetts. Each year, the Clean Water SRF offers approximately $500 million to finance wastewater, stormwater, and renewable energy projects, while the Drinking Water SRF offers approximately $150 million each year to finance drinking water infrastructure projects and improve water qualities. And some of the priorities we have set under the SRF that your communities might be interested in include specifically a PFAS remediation carve-out, where we've committed $8.4 million for water supply testing and treatment design grants to provide free PFAS testing, as well as the testing of private wells in up to 83 communities. And we know that addressing not only public water supply, but also private wells, particularly in Western Mass, is a key piece of this. I think in all the years in Western Mass, I never was on actual public water supply. I always had a well, always had septic. An additional 20 million is available for construction projects to deal with PFAS remediation. We also have a lead service line replacement or abatement carve out, where we've committed $30 million to removing lead from drinking water systems across the state. And in addition to these SRF programs, our administration also provides significant support through several Mass DEP financial programs. And meanwhile, our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which has now enrolled almost 90% of municipalities across the state, is a really critical resource to help you plan for and prepare your infrastructure for the growing impacts of climate change. And I know I have a couple of colleagues here tonight who will provide further details on each of these programs later in the workshop. So please stay tuned for their presentations. I would just say though that, you know, the very first discussion we had on MVP actually happened out in Greenfield with our regional planning agency and many of you. So just thank you for your continued support for that program, for all of the work you've done to help get us to where we are today. And a big thank you again for having me here today, and enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Secretary, and thanks again to the teams of both secretaries for staying on. Really quickly, we also want to recognize that Kelly O'Reilly is here from Representative Carey's office, and we wanted to send a big shout out to Senator Adam Hines, who's been mind melded on today's program, or tonight's program. So with that, and we neglected to recognize and lift up the senator early on. With that, I'm going to baton pass to Linda, who's going to guide us through.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see so many familiar and friendly faces. Just to remind you, we're recording this session tonight. We have a very long agenda, and one of my jobs is a timekeeper, and I've already failed. We're already pretty over time, but that's okay. We're going to make it up and we'll catch up. But I saw that one person already put a question in the chat. That's exactly what we want you to do. Put your questions in the chat. I'll monitor the questions, and if we have time, I'll try to group the questions and see if we can get some of them answered. If we don't have time, don't worry, all of the experts in the room have already said that they will help us answer the questions, and we will send out the answers to your questions in a few days. And with that, Senator, who's next? Juan is next.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. So to Linda and Tom, and certainly to the Senator and the Rep, thank you very much for organizing this workshop and for the invitation for us to be able to participate in this important conversation. I will attempt to project my slides. Give me one moment here. And I
Juan, if
will
you
be-
could project more of those big checks into Western Massachusetts, that would be great too.
That would be awesome, right? Great. And so given, as Linda mentioned, our time, I will try to set a very fast pace here so that we can get to the question and answer period, which is certainly important. So I've been invited to present on the MassWorks program. I would just say, as the Secretary mentioned, it's a highly competitive grant program. It continues to be, offering very flexible source of capital funds to cities and towns, and mainly to support and accelerate housing and job growth throughout the Commonwealth. I would highlight here that what we consider to be competitive applications are those that are leveraging private development that aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, are advanced in their planning and design and permitting, and can demonstrate that they can start construction in the upcoming construction season. The Economic Development Plan, which the Secretary also referenced, does outline how essential it is for us to be working directly with all cities and towns, large and small, to advance economic growth. And MassWorks is designed to assist cities and towns in advancing projects, again, that support job creation, expansion, community housing development, et cetera. And we've distributed a lot of those checks and a lot of those grants to cities and towns since the beginning of this administration. Here I've just outlined, I wanted to outline the actual language from the statute that, you know, essentially shows how broad and encompassing the MassWorks program is in terms of being able to support all types of projects around construction, building, land acquisition, et cetera, related to public infrastructure, sewer, utility extension, streets, et cetera. And I would just highlight, you know, any municipality, any city and town in the Commonwealth, as well as any public agency is eligible to be a direct applicant to MassWorks. And the projects, the funding goes to improvements to public infrastructure that's either owned outright by the public now or can be attained by public leasehold or right of way. Here are just a few examples of some of the projects that have been funded in the past. In Plymouth, we supported the construction of the public wharf. In Holyoke, there was a new redevelopment of Lemon Terrace housing development and included some sewer and drainage, an extension of water mains and hydrants. And then we did some streetscapes in Mashpee for Mashpee Commons. Here are some additional types of projects. So we do a lot of street projects in MassWorks. Certainly those tend to be the ones that are most directly related to the new private development in our cities and towns. But we also do water projects and we do culverts and bridges, et cetera. I want to focus on for a moment, as was mentioned, it's a highly competitive program. We get about 100 applications in any given year. And of those, we ultimately are able to support about an average of 30 to 40. And so I want to highlight that even though for the majority of the 100 applications on a very strict eligibility are usually eligible, right? They come from a city or a town and their public infrastructure. And so where really it becomes important to understand is that then we have the hard job of trying to then determine which are the strongest applications. And this is a little bit of a view into how the things that we look at in terms of these projects. So projects that are consistent with regional plans, that are promoting or supporting development that contains mixed use, transit oriented, reusing previously developed sites is a key element. And any project that is proposing to support housing, that it be high density, or at least not less than 4 units per acre. the community one-stop, which the secretary alluded to. So starting in this fiscal year, we started starting in January for fiscal year 22 grants. We will be accepting proposals for MassWorks and several other programs through the community one-stop for growth. It's a single application portal that will result in a collaborative review process with economic development program staff from HED, Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, DHCD, and Mass Development. We launched this in January, and we are currently open and accepting expressions of interest through April 2nd. And then we will then begin accepting full applications in May with a June 4th deadline. And this is the website where you could get all the information. In addition to MassWorks, these are the other programs that will be included, some of which will be supportive of not only streetscape projects, et cetera, and some of them may have water and sewer project elements. The new Rural Development Fund is included in here, as well as the community planning grants and underutilized properties. Those three programs came directly out of the Economic Development Bond Bill. An element of the one-stop that's going to be super important for everybody to understand, and this is more in detail available on our website, but we're going to be looking at all of the applications along this development continuum. And so what we're asking you, especially as you think about your water infrastructure needs, is to really think about where you may be and where your project is in the life cycle of development. And then to put energy into trying to apply and look for funding at that stage that you're at. That's, I think, what we're trying to convey here is that that's where we see communities being able to be most successful. Instead of everybody running to just apply to MassWorks, which is at infrastructure at the tail end here of the continuum. If you're not ready in that aspect, there may be other things that you can absolutely be ready for if you're earlier on in your planning. So we want you to be mindful of this continuum as you think about what you want to apply for. The allowable use of funds, pre-development, pre-construction, direct construction, a lot of this stuff, as you may already be familiar with in terms of how we distribute MassWorks funding. And then finally, the timeline, it just launched. We're now in the expression of interest stage. We intend to accept full applications in June and review them through the summer with the notification of awards in the October-November timeline. This follows the MassWorks timeline, the annual timeline, mainly because MassWorks is the largest program in the one-stop, and it's the one that has the most most limitations by statute, and so we're just following that timeline. So that is the conclusion of my slides. Thank you.
Shall I just take over?
I really feel like I need to thank Juan for making us catch up on our time. Thank you, Juan.
Yeah, that was very efficient. I will also try to be somewhat efficient. All right, let me just share my screen. All right. So thanks for having me here tonight. Special thanks to the rep and the senator and FERCOG for getting us all together to talk about these important issues. My name is Kara Runston. I'm the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Manager at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So I'll talk to you about our MVP grant programs. I like to set a little context. I won't get into this into the interest of time, but as we know, the climate is changing. We're seeing rising temperatures, changes in precipitation, sea level rise, extreme weather. All of these things kind of are the impetus behind the MVP program and making sure our cities and towns are prepared for these changes. So the MVP program has a working definition of climate resilience, and it's here on the slide: the ability of a community to address the needs of its built, social, and natural environment, to anticipate, cope with, and rebound stronger from events and trends related to climate change. And the key here really is not just recovering, but continuously building capacity to reduce the impacts to future climate events. And this slide just shows a little bit of the history of this administration's leadership on climate issues and climate adaptation. And in 2016, the Baker-Polito administration issued Executive Order 569. That was really a comprehensive approach to both reducing greenhouse gas emissions and preparing for the impacts of climate change, and set the foundation for that promise for municipal support in this area. And then in 2018, the MVP program was codified and through the Environmental Bond Bill, where over 200 million was authorized for climate change adaptation, and a subset of that was for the MVP program. So MVP has two different grant programs, and I actually kind of tried to look through a little bit of the participant list here today, and it looks like there might be some people representing cities and towns that are not yet involved in the MVP program. And our first step in the program is the MVP planning grant. So if your town, which I'll show a map in a slide or two, is not yet in the MVP program, we would love to speak with you. Definitely connect with us. So the MVP planning grant are smaller grants. They're, I know it says 15 to 100,000, but I think typically they're about $15,000 to $30,000. It's roughly a 9-month planning process. It's a prescribed process called the Community Resilience Building Framework that communities go through. And it centers around a workshop where you bring together stakeholders in your community to talk about climate hazards, vulnerabilities that you have in town, and what actions you'd want to take to reduce those vulnerabilities. So it's a collaborative, community-driven process, and the end result is a plan with a set of actions that the community would like to take together. So once the community has an MVP plan, it's then certified as a designated MVP community, and that unlocks the MVP Action Grant funding, or the implementation funds. And the MVP Action Grant funding is used to fund the actions that are in those plans. So action grants are larger grants. They can range up to $2 million per project, and can be conducted over 1 or 2 years. There is a 25% local match or non-state funding source that's needed to complete those projects. And we have about $10 million available per year for the Action Grant program. I'll give a few examples, definitely some water projects in there that I'll highlight, but it can really range wildly depending on what the community's priorities are related to climate change, from further planning to upsizing culverts to land acquisition. There's all kinds of different projects that we've done. This slide shows a map of where we're at with the MVP program. So as the secretary said earlier, we're almost at 90% participation since 2017. So we're really proud of that, that number. And so that's all of the communities that are shaded on this map. And then the dots represent the Action Grant projects. And we have over 160 Action Grant projects that are either completed or ongoing. And we've awarded over $44 million to date. You'll see that we have 6 regional coordinators for the MVP program, and 2 of them from Western Mass are here tonight. So Carrie Ann Petrick and Andrew Smith, some of you have probably worked with them, probably many of you have worked with them, but they're really the one-on-one working with the municipalities on their projects and connecting them with resources. So just a tiny bit more about planning grants. This is that community resilience building process that I was talking about. There's a link if you're interested in learning more about the process at the bottom of this slide, but I won't get into it right now. And then these are some of the deliverables from the planning grant process. So at the workshops, stakeholders fill out a matrix together that helps identify actions. They prioritize the actions and they do different mapping exercises to see where hazards and infrastructure overlap, and use that to inform what they prioritize. We did a quick kind of high-level study of the over 200 plans that we've received to date across the Commonwealth. And this is just some highlights from what we found there. I think by far the top hazard across all plans was inland flooding. People very concerned about that. And then top vulnerabilities include stormwater management and transportation infrastructure and the like. And then top actions also related to pretty closely to what those vulnerabilities were, which makes sense. So action grants. So action grants are all very competitive grants. They become increasingly competitive over the past few years. Last round, we got $46 million requested, and we can only fund about $10 million. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. But because of that, we have to have really strong scoring criteria, kind of like Juan was talking about with MassWorks as well. So we have what we call our 9 MVP core principles that are on this slide. I'm not going to get into all of them, but some of the things that we really value through the program include proactive solutions that are supported by climate data, really responding to what we think future scenarios are going to be rather than reactive. We also prioritize nature-based solutions, or those solutions that leverage nature for its kind of intrinsic climate resiliency benefits. We also emphasize regional projects if possible, because we know that climate change doesn't respect jurisdictional boundaries. And then we also are heavily invested in meaningful community engagement and improving outcomes for environmental justice communities in particular. So our project types for the action grants, we've been kind of switching them up a little to make them clearer. In this round, this is what we're expecting. They're going to kind of mirror more of like project phasing, also a little bit like what Juan was talking about earlier. But planning, assessments, capacity building, and regulatory updates is one bucket, design and permitting, and then construction and on-the-ground implementation. Projects that aren't so MVP competitive listed on this slide, and we do update these, so make sure to look at our RFR when it comes out, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But diesel generators aren't very competitive for MVP grants, tree removal, emergency preparedness that doesn't necessarily incorporate climate projections or planning, and then projects that repair to previous conditions without consideration of climate change impacts in the future. And these are just a few projects that I wanted to highlight. The first two are water related, and the last one is just a different interesting project going on in Western Mass. So this is a Fall River project. They are working on an assessment with some of their neighbors to evaluate the ability of the combined sewer supply, or sorry, the combined water supplies to provide redundancy during periods of critical need. So they're really working together on this project, and that made it a competitive MVP grant. In Belchertown, they're constructing a replacement water storage tank that's going to increase capacity and resiliency to drought. And they're also installing green infrastructure near the tank, developing water conservation strategies, and completing a feasibility and concept design of a rainwater harvesting system at the high school. So this is a really holistic approach. And that also made it very competitive for an MVP grant. And then finally, this is Sheffield and its neighbors out west, and they are doing a regional assessment of the vulnerabilities of rural dirt roads to climate change impacts. And they're incorporating their findings into a pilot project. And I know a lot of other towns are interested in seeing the results of that project. So if you want to see more about the types of projects we funded, we have descriptions and all the deliverables we've received to date on our website on this page, which you can find through this link, our new website, resilientma.org/MVP, that we just launched. And that page also has some interesting new toolkits on nature-based solutions, environmental justice and equity, and some other topics as well. Other current news in the MVP world is that we also have an expression of interest open right now. It's actually closing on Friday, but don't worry, if you have an idea that you think might be competitive for an MVP grant, definitely, even if it's not fully baked, just feel free to submit it. And our regional coordinators are working with people to provide feedback and see if it would be a competitive grant before the full application. It's not required for the full application. And then our applications for both planning and action grants are going to be open, expected at the end of, very end of March, not this month. And so you can look forward to that. And we're having some pre-RFR sessions that you can also get a link to from our website. And with that, that's my contact information. Happy to answer any questions and our website again, but I will pass it over to the next speakers, which I think is DEP.
It is.
Yes.
DEP. Thank you for ending with Shelburne Falls.
Linda, shall I go ahead? Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Cooper, and I'm a Deputy Commissioner at Mass DEP. And with me here tonight are two of my colleagues, who hopefully you'll hear from later in the Q&A, our Assistant Commissioner for Water Resources, Kathy Baskin, and from our Western Region, Deputy Regional Director, Brian Harrington. And between the three of us, we have been at, now this is the third Rural Water Forum. So we have, Mass DEP has attended all of them, and we've learned a lot. And I really commend and congratulate FERCOG, Rep. Blay, and Senator Comerford for starting these forums and keeping them going and having such good follow-up. It's been really helpful to us, and I know helpful to all the communities. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to highlight just a few of our programs. And Secretary Theoharides talked about some of them, and I'll go through pretty quickly, but just to give you kind of an overview of what we have available. The Secretary talked about the State Revolving Fund, which is our, the major state program for financing water infrastructure. This is a program that DEP administers in partnership with the Clean Water Trust, which falls under the State Treasurer's Office. And as the Secretary talked about, we have the Clean Water Trust, which offers low interest loans, particularly for wastewater infrastructure. And then on the drinking water side, we have the Drinking Water SRF. And in addition to the basic infrastructure upgrades that would come to mind, the SRF also can support non-point source pollution projects, nutrient management, green infrastructure, energy efficiency, and stormwater. So I think that's something that's important to keep in mind, that it is the basic core, very important infrastructure, but it also goes beyond that too. So go ahead. Thank you, Courtney. Next slide. And so in terms of project selection, we like to say problem definition is paramount. It's true in life in general, and it's true for the SRF. So we evaluate projects, by criteria that are focused around elements of public health and the environmental impacts. What is the problem in those regards that SRF can help to solve or help a community address. And in terms of sort of process, every year we evaluate the applications that come in, and then we publish what is called, it's really the slate of projects, but we call it the intended use plan, or the IUP. And that goes through a public process. And as it happens, this year's IUP hearing happened today. And so we hope to finalize the projects toward the end of March or beginning of April, and then we will work with communities to go through the contract and get the sort of the loans underway, the funding awarded, and the projects going. But the cycle is almost continuous, because there's always a lot of, while there's conversations in communities in the spring as SRF projects that are getting, that are approved start to get rolling, it's also the time to think about next year's SRF, and in terms of getting the local financing, borrowing approvals that are needed. There are always a lot of conversations beginning around this time of year to be able to apply, and the applications are due in August. I will note, in the larger region of Western Mass, this year's project list includes projects from Adams, from Springfield, Chicopee, Palmer, and Westfield. And the Secretary talked about PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals that have caused drinking water contamination in Massachusetts, as well as in many states around the country. And Westfield the SRF is helping Westfield with a PFAS drinking water system project. So next slide, please. So some highlights. Yes, at the core of the SRF is providing low interest loans, and it's 2% or lower, depending on what the priority is. So for example, PFAS are 0% loans. So that's a priority that the Clean Water Trust and Mass DEP and the administration have identified. And there's also in the SRF, there's something called affordability criteria. So depending on the particular situation of a community, they're put into tiers based on the adjusted income in the community, and you can qualify for more principal forgiveness and a lower or no interest rate. So the average amount of funding for the SRF is 495 or about 500 million for wastewater, and then about 150 to 166 million for drinking water, which is what we had last year. This year we have more resources to work with due to funding from the administration, and then also additional federal funding. So we are going to have about 600 million for wastewater and 195 million for drinking water, and that's really good news because we know that the needs are very great. Something that I wanted to particularly emphasize to all of you is that by federal law, so Congress requires that 15% of the drinking water SRF funding be dedicated to small systems, and rightly so. And we are spending that amount or proposing that amount in the IUP, but we don't have any projects in this region, and we would like to. So we encourage you to look at that and take advantage of it, and talk to us if you think that we can be helpful in helping to shape or think through a possible SRF application for a small system. So we've talked about PFAS remediation as a priority. Lead removal, particularly lead service line replacement, is something that we have extra funding for this year. Nitrogen control has been a priority for a number of years, and prioritizing disadvantaged communities and small systems is also very important and high on the list. So next slide, please. So the asset management grant program is actually part of the SRF, but lesser known, than the larger loans that we provide for water infrastructure. So I want to mention it because we award $2 million every year in grants, and so these are not SRF loans; these are actually grants, and they're for planning. So for asset management plans for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. And the grant, as the slide says, will cover 60% of a planning project cost, and the other 40% match can be in-kind services. And so it's a pretty easy bar to meet. And so encourage people to take advantage of that program, and it follows the same cycle. So now we have the draft list of projects out also for asset management, and they include, we have a project from Adams, which is a sewer and stormwater asset management project, one from the city of Pittsfield, and one from Southampton. So it's a really good project and a really good tool, and it's often funding for planning is hard to come by. So encourage people to take a look at that one. Next slide, please. So another program that I wanted to highlight tonight is called the Water Utility Resilience Program. And the goal of this program is to improve the resilience of drinking water and wastewater systems, and to provide an all hazards approach to technical assistance for these utilities. And so and let me underscore this part, what we're offering technical assistance, and it's free. It's absolutely free. There is no match involved. And what we're focusing on right now are GIS mapping systems. And so providing those to drinking water and wastewater utilities. And so we have different kinds. I'm going to show you a couple of different types of the maps that we're providing. They're detailed system maps, they're service area maps, and in this year we're providing assistance to 81 communities and 132 systems. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you an example. So this is the town of Orange, and this is a system map, and I want to say that what a city or town will receive is this detailed file, but we're will also include critical infrastructure. It's partly for emergency planning, and some of that information is not prudent to make public. So this sample map that I'm showing you doesn't have any of that critical infrastructure, but what it does show is, you know, the direction of the flow, the pipe material, the date of installation, the valves, pump stations, and hydrants. So that's what the utility would have access to, and it's helpful for all kinds of system planning and climate preparedness too, importantly. So next slide, please. And the program also provides water system area maps. And so this just is an example of the whole region, or it's our DEP Western region. And so it shows the public water system service area. And, you know, it can be used for emergency planning, you know, it can be used for sometimes thinking about public access, things like that. It's just, you know, sort of basic, fundamental, foundational information to have. And the next slide shows that's a water service area map for Orange. And it's also helpful in thinking about flooding issues as well. So this is a great program. We've been offering it for a number of years, and it's open now, and we anticipate that it will be open in the new fiscal year as well. So I think one of the slides includes a link. So would encourage you to check that out. And we're also happy to make connections with our program manager on this as well. So next slide. So we've spoken already in the course of the evening a fair bit about PFAS and PFAS contamination, which is something that the administration has been very focused on addressing and has put a lot of resources to bear to do that. The Secretary alluded to the funding that the legislature appropriated, which we really appreciated, to support testing, public water supplies testing for PFAS, as well as offering targeted private well sampling. And we are doing that in communities, many in this area where more than 60% of the population is served by private wells. So that is going on now. And as many of you know, DEP has a new drinking water standard for PFAS, which requires public water systems to test. And so this program is allowing for doing the testing early and for us picking up the cost of the first round of that testing. We are also, with this funding from the legislature, we are providing grants that support design of treatment. So the first step before construction. So I mentioned Westfield is doing a PFAS remediation project, and the design's the first step. And so these grants are supporting that. We've already awarded one round to 10 public water systems, and we have another round in the works, and we anticipate announcing those awards soon. We've already talked about the state revolving fund resources, so I won't repeat that. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is the last, but this is pretty important. And I think we may have talked about this dedicated funding for small and disadvantaged public water systems at the first forum, because I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly, that at the time DEP had just received funding, or received word of funding coming from EPA, just under $1 million, that we then matched with another almost matched with another 800,000 for a total of about 1.8 million. And what this program is it's specifically for public water systems serving small and disadvantaged communities to address specific, water quality violations under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, where these small systems may not have the resources, or it's not affordable or practical to address these violations. And so this funding is specifically for those systems. And so rather than it being a competitive grant that's open to anybody to apply to, this is targeted. And so the way that we looked at recommending awards was based on specific types of violations of the federal act, and then also whether a project to fix the violation was shovel ready. So this is something that we think will really be really helpful, and soon we'll be announcing those awards. So we look forward to sharing that information with you all soon. So next slide. And so this is just our contact information. I also neglected to recognize Courtney Rainey, who is, among other things, sharing the slides. So she's really actually a very important part of our team. She's our Director of Government Affairs and Municipal Partnerships. And I mentioned Kathy. And then this is Brian Harrington, I mentioned. Our Western region is led by Mike Gorski, Regional Director, and the rest of the Bureau of Water Resources staff are listed here so that you have all of our contact information. And I really want to emphasize that we're here to help, and we want to engage and help problem solve. So with that, thank you for the opportunity and look forward to the Q&A later in the program.
Linda, you're muted.
We are on to Shelley. Thank you. One of my staff has a mug that says, "You are mute, you're on mute." She just holds it up.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for having me this evening to present on the BRIC program. I'm Shelley O'Toole. I work with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. I'm a hazard mitigation grants coordinator, and I'm the grants coordinator for Western Mass. So I know a lot of you and have worked with a lot of you in the past, and nice to see you again this evening. All right, so hazard mitigation, we're saving lives, infrastructure, and money by adapting to natural hazards, protecting people and structures from future hazards, maintaining consistency with resiliency and sustainability principles, minimizing the cost of disaster response and recovery, and providing an increased level of protection. All right, so the BRIC program, what is it? It provides federal funding to states, territories, tribes for pre-disaster mitigation activities. It is funded through FEMA, and MEMA is the pass-through entity. So the communities would apply to MEMA, and then we would apply to FEMA in that way. It's a significant funding source. Currently, the funding cap is $50 million federal share per project, which is a huge increase over the past caps we've seen. It was typically $4 million in the past, so this is quite a jump. The priorities for FEMA, they incentivize the public infrastructure projects, those that mitigate risk to one or more FEMA lifelines, and I'll go through those lifelines in the next slide. So this is what FEMA considers the community lifelines. As you'll see, the food, water, shelter lifeline for your water and wastewater would be considered one of those lifelines. So it does make these projects eligible for FEMA. Speaking of eligible, these are the project activities. I won't go through all of them, but we do have several examples of construction projects that fall into the water and wastewater categories this evening. But other than that, we do have culverts and drainage upgrades is another big, a popular item for us. All right, so the sub-applicant eligibility requirements. So you need to be a local government, city, town, or a special district government. So that's your sewer and wastewater districts are eligible. State agencies are also eligible. An important thing to note is all sub-applicants must have a valid hazard mitigation plan in place at the time of application and award. So it's really important to have that hazard mitigation plan and also keep it current. And if you have any questions, if you have a current plan, please let me know and I can let you know. So I'll get into some examples of these types of projects. So here's one from Shelburne Falls. This was a pump station electrical control relocation. So you'll see in my pictures, the picture on the left was after a flooding event, and that brick building is the pump station. So it was severely impacted by the flooding, and their electrical system was kind of blown out. So we were able to move that electrical system up the hill. You'll see the down below in that picture on the far right is where it was, but it was moved way uphill out of harm's way. funded through the HMGP program, which is another FEMA hazard mitigation assistance program. The fire district built the new building on their own, but we were able to move the controls and provide a generator for that. Another example is a soil stabilization project. This one was in Chelmsford. The Merrimack riverbank was stabilized, and on the top of that riverbank was a critical sewer line. So in doing this mitigation activity, we were able to protect that sewer line and protect the infrastructure. Again, this was funded through the HMGP program, and this was completed summer 2019. Generators are another popular item, and sewer pump station generators are protecting a critical infrastructure. This was funded. We're actually in the process of closing it out right now. It's just completed. It just completed the final site visit this week. So we're protecting 9 individual pump stations with generators. So it creates that redundancy for those systems. Here's one that we're just getting started on. It's a bank stabilization in Leominster. Again, this is another one where we're protecting a critical sewer line and a wastewater treatment facility on the Nashua River. So this is another great example of protecting that infrastructure that runs right along that riverbank. This is another one we're just getting started on, flood resiliency retrofit in Hull. So it's elevating the critical electrical assets at the Hull wastewater pollution control facility above the current flood elevation levels. And this project also took into consideration sea level rise, which, as we all know, is very important. It's underway and being funded through the HMGP program. It's scheduled to be complete in fall of 2022. This is one that was just an application just went into FEMA for the new BRIC program. And the BRIC program this is the first year of it. So we're all learning about it at the same time. This involves completely relocating a pump station out of harm's way. And this is, I believe, a $13 million project. So this is an example of a project that FEMA was not able to fund prior due to funding caps. So it makes it much more affordable for the communities to be able to do those larger projects that are oftentimes necessary. And I'm just throwing this one in here. It's a culvert upgrade in Beckett. It included the upgrade of an undersized culvert. I know it doesn't really have to do with water, wastewater, but these are the types of projects that we see a lot of. And I know a lot of you on the call today wear many hats in your communities. So keep us in mind for these types of projects as well. What's not eligible for BRIC? So the projects that do not reduce the risk to people, structures, or infrastructures, any projects that are dependent on another action to be effective, those are considered repair or deferred maintenance. We do see a lot of projects that kind of straddle that line a little bit, so we need to be aware of that. Preparedness measures, projects where physical work has already started, we can't do retroactive grant funding. Projects that are in coastal barrier resource areas or OPAs, those that involve land contaminated with hazardous waste, and then those that primarily address ecological or agricultural issues. How do we apply? So contact me, I can help you. Right now, we have technical assistance funding to help communities develop applications for the next round of BRIC. So this is a perfect time to get in contact with us to talk about it. We're also going to be posting a statement of interest form on our website next week, by the end of next week. So you can either email me or look for that next week. But at any time, we're happy to talk to you about any ideas you have. What do you need to know about these grants? So MEMA is the conduit. I already mentioned that. The process is lengthy. So this isn't for the type of things that need to be done, this spring. The grant application process can take several months to a year, and sometimes upwards of a year. So please be prepared. So if this, if that doesn't fit into your timeline, this probably isn't the right grant program for you. Again, it's the sub-applicant's responsibility to maintain and keep your hazard mitigation plan current. And it's also your responsibility to ensure that federal procurement rules are followed. The benefit cost analysis, those of you that have worked with us in the past know the trials and tribulations of the BCA. So this is something that is basically a non-starter for FEMA. Projects do need to be cost effective, and they demonstrate their cost effectiveness through this BCA tool. So this is really the first thing you need to start thinking about if you're thinking about a project. You could have the best project in the world, but if you can't demonstrate cost effectiveness, it's not eligible for FEMA. So this is something, when we're providing technical assistance, we really start with that because there's really no point in going further if we can't meet that criteria. I'll just go quickly through procurement. We all are familiar with procurement with our different roles. However, with FEMA grants, you do need to adhere to the federal procurement rules, which are slightly different when it comes especially to engineering consultants. So, that's kind of getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit. You do need to provide 25% non-federal cost share, and that can include state grants. So the previous speakers, we have worked with MassWorks, we've worked with MVP and the SRF program. So, you can use that as your non-federal cost share. So it's a great opportunity to partner some of these programs if the timing works out. It doesn't always work out, but we have seen it happen, and there have been instances where communities have, completed a great project with $0 out of their local funding. And this is my last slide. Again, contact me with any questions, any project ideas. Our website's at the bottom. I'm happy to talk to you about any ideas. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Shelley. And we're back on time, you guys. So we have one more presentation by USDA, but I don't know which of our two USDA folks are giving the presentation. Christopher,
I'm
is
going
it
to
you?
start. I'm going to start.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. I'm doing a sound check. Am I good? Thank you. I've had some technical difficulties today. So thanks everyone for inviting us to speak at this event. I'm kind of taken aback by the amount of information that I'm learning about. So I think I have a lot of work to follow up, quite frankly, and folks to collaborate with. So I thank you all for sharing that information. I have about 5 pages of notes already. Anyways, my name is Jen Lurch. I am Director of Business and Cooperative Programs for USDA at Rural Development. Rural development is obviously focused on rural areas, which for our purposes today is going to be 10,000 or less. Chris, if you could go to the first slide, please. That would be great.
Sure.
Second one, rather, I guess.
Sorry. Whoops. So having some trouble. There you go.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Sorry about that.
So basically, in a nutshell, who is rural development? We're the funding arm of USDA. We're focused in rural areas. You can see our area offices there. We're a tri-state jurisdiction, and we offer housing, business, and community programs. And one of the ones that we're kind of showcasing today is our water and wastewater program. That's WEP for short. And I am not going to give away the show because Chris is doing the presentation. Chris joined us very recently, so this will be his first presentation. But I know he's among friends. So he's going to be great. And so not to bring spoilers, but I do want to put out there just two or three small things. In terms of highlights, a couple of projects, Orange and Deerfield, were both over $10 million. Those were 25% or more grants. So we offer loans and grants. We do smaller projects. Provincetown is an example of that. That was about $2.5 million, 50% grants. And you may or may not have heard, we also funded Hardwick recently, and that was a $30 million project, of which 17 million was grants. We are exceedingly proud of that one. And I'm going to give a shout out to Senator Govey's office and staff. She was a great collaborator in that effort, and the state stepped up for $5 million on that project. So with that, I would encourage folks to call us. We're really informal. We love to chat. We're happy to do so by video or good old-fashioned phone. And also, I would extend that invitation to other presenters here tonight. Again, I have a lot to learn, but it sounds like there's collaboration to be had. So I would welcome that opportunity if any want to just give me a shout. With that, I will hand it over to Chris Hess for our presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jen. Hi, everyone. Let's get started. So who's in, who's out? Am I eligible? These are the popular questions that are asked quite often. Well, let's find out who's eligible. For RD assistance, most state and local governmental entities such as districts, public bodies such as municipalities and counties, private nonprofits, and federally recognized Native American tribes. The areas or locations that are eligible for WEP include rural areas and towns with fewer than 10,000 people, tribal reservation if the tribe is federally recognized. I'd like to mention that we actually have a section on USDA website with a search bar that you can use right now to check if your area is eligible for WEP. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And of course, if you prefer to speak to one of our specialists, they can certainly help you with that information. So now that you found that you're eligible, what now? What can these funds actually be used for? The funds can be used to acquire, construct, or improve drinking water sourcing, treatment, storage, and distribution, sewer collection, transmission, treatment, and disposal, solid waste collection, disposal, and closure, stormwater collection, transmission, and disposal. And in some cases, it can be used for legal and engineering fees, permits and equipment, startup operations and maintenance, purchases of existing facilities to improve service, and as well as interest during construction. But do keep in mind, this is only for Rhode Island and Connecticut. So the allocations for direct loans and grants for fiscal year 2020, our loan total was $30,021,000 and our grant total was $9,058,000. So what about the loan term and rate? We have up to a 40-year term, which is based on the useful life of the facilities financed. And we have fixed interest rate that depends on the need for the project and median household income. Now, what about grants? Well, they're always subject to availability. This heavily depends on system rates that are above similar systems, projects that are necessary to mitigate a health or sanitary issue, and that the service area has a median household income below the state's non-metro MHI. It's important to mention that projects will never be eligible for 100% grant funding unless the EQUAG program is utilized. EQUAG stands for Emergency Community Water Assistance Grants, which is a WEP program that helps eligible communities prepare or recover from an emergency that threatens the availability of safe, reliable drinking water. So now let's discuss our planning grant programs. There are two specific ones, SEARCH and PPG. SEARCH stands for Special Evaluation Assistance for Rural Communities and Households, and PPG stands for Pre-Development Planning Grants. The purpose of these programs are to assist low-income communities with initial planning and development of applications for USDA Rural Development Water and Waste Disposal Direct Loan/Grant and Loan Guarantee Programs. So who may apply to SEARCH and PPG? Well, most state and local governmental entities, nonprofit organizations, and federally recognized tribes. Eligible areas for PPG include rural areas and towns with populations of 10,000 or less, federally recognized tribal lands, and colonias. Eligible areas for SEARCH include rural areas with population of 2,500 or less, or areas that have a median household income below the poverty line or less than 80% of statewide non-metropolitan median household income based on the latest census data. So the funds for PPG could be used to pay for Part of the cost of developing a complete application for USDA Rural Development Water and Waste Disposal Direct/Loan/Grant and Loan Guarantee Programs. And for search, the funds could go towards feasibility studies to support applications for funding water or waste disposal projects, preliminary design and engineering analysis, and technical assistance for the development of an application for financial assistance. As for the grant terms, well, grants may not be used for work already completed. These grants do not have to be paid back if the application for the USDA direct loan or loan/grant combination is not successful. Search has a max grant amount of $30,000 or 75% of eligible costs, whichever is less, and a match is required. For PPG, the max grant amount is also $30,000 or 100% of pre-development planning costs, and there is no matching required. So for loan and grant considerations, certain information will be checked to ensure applicants are eligible, of course, funding. Some of the questions include, did the borrower experience a loss in the last 3 years on their audit? Are the revenues broken out by system? Will the project be used for a public purpose? So you can always contact us, reach out to us to set up a meeting, or you can reach out to Joseph Delbo. He is one of our loan specialists and can certainly help you. His contact information will be posted at the end of this presentation. So RD Apply, what is it? Well, it's an application intake system that allows you to apply for loans and grants directly online. You can create an application, upload attachments, sign certifications, and draw service areas, to name a few features. Technical assistance providers and engineers can set up an e-authentication and actually help applicants fill out the online application. We encourage people to use RD Apply since it is convenient. You will have access to information 24/7. Your information that is submitted to the federal government will remain safe and secure, and it reduces paper consumption, which we all know benefits the environment. Now, for the application timeline, typical turnaround time with pre-applications is 2 to 3 weeks. Once proceeding with a full application, that could go from 1 to 2 months. Now, why does it take so long? Well, aside from all the forms that need to be completed, a PER and an environmental review is needed. An environmental review is basically a process of reviewing a project and its potential environmental impacts to determine whether it complies with the National Environmental Policy Act and related laws and authorities. And that alone could easily take 45 to 60 days to complete, which is really important and enables us to make informed decisions. And PERs are preliminary engineering reports that basically show the need for a project, which forms the basis of our application. So our recommendation is to apply during off-season. This is from October to February. After that, the programs start, and processing new applications can potentially take much longer. So the best would be to aim for October to February when planning to submit applications. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and here is our contact information. Thank you again.
I think that's it, and we're on to questions. I have 7 questions, and there's one more in the chat that I need to get. And the first question was asked by 3 different people, and it is related to sewer districts that are not associated with the town specifically, private sewer districts, public water supplies that are not operated by the municipality, and then combined quasi-private water and quasi-governmental sewer. All of these people are wondering which grants would allow an application by these more private systems. They didn't ask specifically who, so can I just go down the list? Juan, would a sewer district be allowed to apply?
A non-public? Yeah, for mass works, that only public entities would be eligible.
I guess that's the question of what's the definition of public in this case, right? Because taxpayers are paying the rates. Okay, what about MVP, Kara?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our legislative language is actually very specifically for municipalities. So it is an area that we've heard feedback in before, and we are trying to explore how best to address that. But for now, it is only municipalities.
Okay, and Stephanie, you talked about a lot of your grants being okay for public water supplies, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Focused on public systems, which could be, you know, a combined system for a couple of towns or regional. But if not, you know, state revolving fund, certainly not for a private system.
Actually, on the water side, it is, as long as you're a public water system. This is Brian Harrington.
Oh, thank you. Yes, no, thank you, Brian. Yes.
On the water side, we have done it to districts. We have done it to private water companies are eligible. One of the challenges is security for repayment of the loan. And so that becomes a little more difficult as opposed to a municipality where you have to get your cherry sheet certified and they can pluck it off of that if need be. So it's security, but public water systems are eligible, even private water companies that operate a public water system. So as long as you're a registered public water system.
Awesome.
No, thank you. The definition of public water system, or PWS as we call it, is quite broad. So thank you very much, Brian.
Shelley, how about the BRIC program?
Yes, special districts are eligible. It just, you need to make sure that they are included in a planning process for a hazard mitigation plan. So, you know, with their particular town, they need to be involved, and the project should really be identified in the hazard mitigation plan.
Awesome. And then finally, Jen or Christopher?
Yep, I'll answer that. We have loans and grants to districts, but the key for us is that they need to be either a public body or controlled by the public body. And so that we do have special districts because it is a sub-entity of the public body. But in terms of private districts, no, that's not something we're able to do.
Thank you. Jen, while you're still off mute, another question came in, whether USDA loans with a higher interest rate can be refinanced.
I saw that. That is a great question. And anyone who wants to pursue that, I would encourage you to call me directly. In short, the answer is maybe. And the reason for that is because our regulation says we can only refinance agency debt if it is an incremental portion of subsequent project or application. So if somebody has a loan on our books, for example, and let's say the loan remaining balance is $1 million, and they come to us for a new project of, let's say the loan is $6 or $7 million, then that is a small portion of the project, so we could fold that in. If just to come to us directly and be able to refinance, or if the amount is larger than what their current application is, we cannot do that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Shelley, can I turn to you? And there were two people who asked about the BRIC program for repairing, replacing, or upgrading dams and dikes.
Yes, those are eligible activities under the BRIC program and hazard mitigation assistance programs overall. However, I will caution you and say that we haven't seen any funded. We've seen several applications, but never have we seen any funded. We do have one dam project into FEMA right now through the BRIC program to see if that will be funded. So again, it's maybe. It's definitely eligible, but it also needs to demonstrate an increase in capacity. It can't be a repair. So we really need to avoid that R word with any of the FEMA grants. But, you know, if you're talking about an upgrade or something like that, that would be that would make more sense. Also, just we need to remember the benefit cost analysis. So it does need to be cost effective.
Can you guys now have a competition of who is the best source for a sewer expansion project? You can all raise your hands at the same time, but one question was, a new town center being developed needs sewer infrastructure.
I'd have to step on that, assuming that it is eligible, which again, for us means you are less than 10,000 population. So we do actually have such projects pretty consistently. So I would encourage you to talk to us.
Winner, Jen wins.
And not to take away from Jen's limelight, but I would say please also come talk to us in the SRF program, because I think that we could assist with that.
Trevor, I'm not forgetting you. It's just such a big topic. Hold on. Another question, Juan, for you was that some concern about can rural towns really compete for MassWorks programs because the concern not as competitive, the outcomes not as dramatic, et cetera. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. So I would say two things. One is certainly, as the secretary outlined, there is a carve out, right, that relates to road projects in small towns defined as having 7,000 people or less. And those are strict road projects. There's no connection to any private development or any need to prove housing, jobs, et cetera. The challenge there is we do get a lot of applications in that category. And so what we've done is prioritize and kind of really focused on those applications that are able to make make strong arguments around public safety. So if there's an imminent collapse of a culvert that will then cause ambulances and fire trucks to have to detour, things like that, or if the application talks about any accident history in that road or that intersection, those are usually very successful projects that come with a very specific public safety concern, the imminent danger, things like that. On the other side, I would say, I really want to highlight, right, that we are very cognizant, as the secretary outlined, as is outlined in our economic development plan, and as the administration has communicated time and again, we're dedicated to bringing resources to small towns. And so when we talk about measuring that competitiveness, please know it's very relative and proportional to, when we view this to what a small town. When we look for a small town, competitive, means, bringing 4 units of housing online. That is significant in a small town. That's how we view it. We're not judging an application from a small town in comparison to something that comes in from Boston or Worcester or Springfield, right, where 4 units is a drop in the bucket. So please know that when we're evaluating applications, we're usually looking in the categories with your application with other similar sized towns, and then try to make that judgment from there and say, okay, how significant is this? It doesn't matter. Like I said, it could be a small number of units, or it could be a small expansion of a business that's going to, result in 5 jobs. Again, in a particular place, that may be the game changer. And we judge it that way. So I do want to, if I can leave people with anything, is please know that, when you're coming into MassWorks, we're evaluating you in kind of proportional to the size of your community, and when we're applying these principles and competitive kind of angles to your application, we're very cognizant, right, of what it means to be competitive in a small town versus the big cities. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Stephanie, there was one question that one municipality got 1 free PFAS test, but is now being charged. Can towns get more than 1 free PFAS test?
So through the program, it pays for 1 round of testing. So maybe we can follow up with that. individual specifically, just to make sure. If it's not a full testing round, then we could still assist. If that round has been paid for, then it would be the system's responsibility going forward. But we can follow up. I'll make sure we trace through the chat and get that contact person.
And while I have you, the small and disadvantaged program, what's the definition of disadvantage? Is it based on the socioeconomics of the whole town? Could it be based on those that are being served by the system that might be a subset of the town?
I am actually not positive about that. So I would like to just check rather than perhaps say the wrong thing. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it just what you said, Linda, is it the entire town or just the area that the particular system serves? I think it's the former, but I would like to check that. Unless Brian or Kathy happens to know, I just want to make sure that that we get the right answer on that one.
Okay.
Sorry,
had
I'm
this-
not sure either. I can look into
Well-
it while we're speaking. And also I'll put my contact information for the person who's looking for the PFAS testing information into the chat. I'll put that in my chat.
We have the same question about the PPG program, whether that is the whole town or could be the section of the town that is served by the system.
That would be on the basis of the town. The system, if I understand correctly, the system is part of the town. So the town would be the applicant, I'm guessing. If the town is the applicant, then it would really just be a grant that is directed at producing a preliminary engineering report to make the improvements that are proposed for that specific portion of the system. Hopefully
Thank
that
you.
answered it.
Thank you. And now, Trevor, let's talk sludge. Sludge disposal is a huge issue because it is, there are very limited places to dispose of sludge. Prices are increasing. Do any of you see an option or a solution to this really vexing, expensive problem? Go ahead, Trevor.
Well, yes, and this might not be the forum for it, so, but I just wanted to talk a bit about sludge disposal, and that is a major expense. We're seeing it, double in cost in the last few years when we process. There's a couple things when we process our, at our wastewater treatment plants, we wind up with sludge at the end, and depending on the quality of your plant gives you the quality of sludge, believe it or not. And there's not many places that are taking it. We're down to Lowell, I think. And so we're trucking this stuff all the way to Lowell and spending, $10,000 a shot. And, once a month or every few weeks, it gets really, really expensive. So there's nobody really, I don't see anybody really on a state level or regional level addressing this. And this is just like a ticking time bomb that we're not going to have a place to get rid of this stuff, especially with PFAS. Lowell's going, well, why am I taking the responsibility of pulling all this stuff on? So it's a real liability for small, or for any plant, but really for small facilities. The other part of that is our local, get your septic pumped, and there's really nowhere to drop that stuff off anymore either. We're luckily through USDA, we're upgrading one of our plants, and we're looking to maybe dismantle and pump the other one to this new plant once, maybe a 5-year plan to redo it. But we're looking at, do we do a septage, accepting septage there to give a solution, but that's really expensive and it takes on a liability too. So we're just looking at, where do we handle sludge, and is anybody looking at it on a state level or regional level?
So Linda, I can start, and I'll just say we recognize that this is a huge problem, and that ultimately solving it is key to the future of our communities and certainly the viability of wastewater treatment overall. So it is something that we're thinking about. And I do want you to know, Trevor, it sounds like you know a lot about this issue, but I want the group to know that Massachusetts is participating in a regional study that the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission is convening with all of its member states. And we have, we're financially contributing to that study because it's so important. Looking at sludge costs around the region and looking at potential solutions. And I thought I saw somebody in the chat, writing about, could there be, a new sludge disposal facility for a certain number of towns or for region. I know that's something that's been looked at. I think there's something across the border in Vermont, a project that was potentially going to happen. So we, at the state level know that we need to help figure out what the solution is. Unfortunately, I can't tell you tonight that we have that, but we're very much aware of the issue.
Great.
And so we'll look forward to the results, and we'll be sure to share the results of this new WEPIC study with this group. And I hope it will lead us to some good follow-up actions. And Kathy or Brian may have something more to say on that, and others as well. But.
I think you said it well.
No one wants to touch it. Thank you.
We have a couple more questions. Jen, one question is, how competitive are USDA grants? How many people, how many municipalities are applying for how much money?
That's a great question. I'm going to narrow the focus on that answer to Massachusetts, which for us is very different than Rhode Island funding or how Connecticut turns out. In Massachusetts, basically it's somewhat competitive, but what I will represent is that regardless of our numbers and our funds on the ground here in Massachusetts, national office for us reserves a pretty big pot of money that we can access. And I have been, really blessed to be able to do that the past, couple, 2-3 years. We have annually used more money than we have. However, we have not turned anyone away in the 3 years since I've been program director. We have not turned anyone away from a loan or a grant. The other thing I'll mention in connection with that is our loans travel with grants. In other words, we don't just provide grants for projects. It's loan and grants, or just loan if you're not eligible for a grant. In terms of competition for a grant, I would suggest there's not a huge amount of competition. It needs to be a priority project and the credit has to be good for the loan perspective. But folks can contact me to inquire about whether you're eligible. We kind of have a master list that was produced by national office years back. And so towns on that list will either not be eligible, typically because the MHI is too high, or it will be 15, 25, 35, sometimes 55, and rarely, but possibly 75% grants. That's how they run for us, the increments there. And so that doesn't mean you will get that amount, but it does mean that there is the possibility you can subject our funding. So hopefully that answered the question. I would encourage folks who are interested definitely to contact us, because again, we've not turned anyone away in Massachusetts the past few years. And I will add that probably, I'm going to hazard a guess here, 75% of our projects in our jurisdiction do include material grants, millions.
Thank you, Jen.
Sure.
I think this question is for Juan, which the question is, do you ever see a point in time when age of infrastructure, i.e. old, aging infrastructure, is more important than job creation and job expansion? So maintenance of existing infrastructure that then without it could actually result in a loss of jobs.
I guess I would say maybe. I think it's one of the important things to keep in mind is we never know going into each round who's going to apply, so we never know. Part of the competitiveness that I talked about also depends on who's in the mix, right? Who applies and how many communities of what type. In a situation like that, I think it would be certainly important, but I would just probably underline that the extent to which the program is at the housing and economic development kind of part of the state. The focus really has been around the intent here of the statute has been to leverage the resource in order to create economic growth, and that's defined by housing, by jobs, by in various other elements. So I think that will kind of always be the underlying. I think on a case-by-case basis, there certainly have been cases, I'm sure, where there's been a very compelling argument made that supports something that's imminently. I think the point here is that it has an imminent negative impact on the economy as the case. So I would say it's a case by case. The overall, the priority continues to be that creation or the growth element, but I think we would take it, depending on how it gets submitted.
Thank you. Stephanie, back to PFAS testing. There's a question on what is the definition of a round, and can it include the entire town's inventory of private wells?
Oh, okay. So let me make sure that we're being clear. The testing, paying for a round is for a public water supply doing testing. Testing of its system, and the private well program is a little bit different. So that's where we're working in towns that are served mostly by private wells, and we're working with the individual town leadership and with the boards of health, and we with them select targeted private wells to sample. And so we then reach out to those private well owners to see if they're interested, and it is voluntary. At the same time, if someone would like to sign up, they can also sign up, and we see if we can accommodate them. And that is for one round of sampling at each of those private wells that are selected for the program. So I hope that was clear. Okay, good.
While we are on PFAS, that there is a question about the possibility of combining sludge into a single facility. I know that Greenfield was looking into that. Marlo was here for a while. I don't know if he still is. And one of the concerns is PFAS, that the owner of the facility would be responsible if PFAS was detected. And with a regional facility, you don't know where the contamination is coming from. Do you have a thought on that?
What I would say is that ultimately a long-term sludge solution, it needs to be also include a long-term addressing PFAS, in all media solution, PFAS remediation. So, we are looking at PFAS in sludge and biosolids as well, or the potential for that. Our other neighboring states are grappling with it too. It's not an easy issue. We've started by, asking the entities that we approve for land application of residuals, of wastewater residuals, to do testing for PFAS. So I would say that, that's sort of an added layer of complexity to the sludge disposal challenge. And I can, certainly for Greenfield, I would imagine that would be a concern. And I think I remember talking to Marlo at the first forum. So, yes, that is an issue. And yes, that also is something that needs to be factored in and resolved, whether it's ultimately treatment or something else. You're finding the source, making sure that it doesn't end up in the sludge. But it's a big challenge.
And did Kevin just solve the problem by saying we should purchase a screw press that can travel around Franklin County and create a regional composting facility? Is it done? I honestly don't know what that means. What does the screw press do? Are there more?
I think it would be to dewater the sludge to make it less water content, so it's cheaper to transport, and in some instances less expensive to dispose of, because of it may open some other markets. So that's
just a big press.
That was the idea.
I see.
It's, you either use a centrifuge or a press or something to squeeze the water out, reduce the weight. It's cheaper to transport. You put more in and it reduces your transportation and sometimes disposal costs.
Awesome. Trevor asks if we expect any large influx of federal funding. Has anyone heard anything about that?
I'll step up on that one because I get asked that quite a bit. What I hear so far is that our program, the WEP program that we're talking about, we will likely have a good amount more funding, but it will not necessarily be in this budget year. It is perhaps more likely to come in fiscal year 21. We're not hearing any rumblings of new programs where the money would be directed, but again, probably just into loan and grants in our WEP program.
Thank you. And Senator Comerford, was your question about the study that Stephanie was talking about?
Yes, sorry, and I was going to email you directly, Stephanie. I'm so excited about that study. Thank you for diving in. It is so, as Trevor said, so well, so critically needed. And I know there are towns who are not present tonight. I know you know this, Stephanie. There are towns not present tonight for whom this is a major issue. So I was wondering when the study was going to be out so that we could look for it.
Yes, so I know that it started in October, and I think it may be a 2-year study, but we will confirm that. Unless Kathy, if you know off the top of your head, please unmute yourself, but we will confirm that. Yeah. And we'll sure to keep you briefed as we are getting any kind of results or any information that could be helpful.
Absolutely. And I will look forward to that. And we can follow up. Absolutely. Thank you for doing that work.
Sure.
I think it's a very long chat, so I was trying to capture all the questions and I think I did, but did I miss any questions? Are we going to end early?
It would be shocking.
What?
We should all do that. Thank you so much for everybody tonight.
I guess we are. Really, thank you, all of our speakers. That was a lot of information. I love that our Jen may have learned the most of the whole participating audience. Joe or Natalie, do you want to add anything?
I'm just deeply grateful. I felt Elena and I were texting back and forth, just being so amazed by everyone's service and the wealth of knowledge you just brought. And I can't wait to share the slides with the planning agencies and the video for folks who couldn't be here. Deeply grateful.
And I am always happy to talk about sludge. It's something I learned about when I worked for Congressman John Olver, and we were working with the town of Montague on exploring sludge and how to handle it. So I'm just so grateful to really dig down deep into these issues that we don't tend to talk about very often, but they are so important to our local municipalities. And I'm so grateful to our state and federal partners for being here tonight to walk us through these potential funding solutions for our communities. And I hope you all know that we stand here as partners with you and are ready to support you should any of these programs make sense for your community. Senator Comerford and your team, I just want to thank you so much for doing everything to really pull this together. And Linda, rockstar job on that timekeeping. You really did amazing.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
I wanted to let everybody know, I don't know, while I was in college, I read this book called Toxic Sludge. So every time you guys mentioned sludge, I just kept thinking of the book. It's a good read. For anyone on this screen who has not read it, I trust me, read it. It's really, really good. It's called Toxic Sludge.
Sludge for everyone. We will get this recording out to everyone who has who registered. We've been asked to make sure the slides are available. We will do that. We've been asked to make sure that we give you the contact information and name of our many fabulous presenters. We will do that. And we will also go through the chat. So if I missed any questions that we need to get answered, we will do that for you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Everybody.
you.
Good to see you all.
Night.
Take care, everyone.
Good
Good
job.
night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.